The dim hotel room buzzed with uneasy silence as we sat, each of us nursing a coffee that had long since gone cold. The warmth of the sun filtering through the windows felt surreal, almost mocking after the cold, oppressive night we'd endured. But no amount of daylight could erase the dark memories that now seared into our minds. Emily sat by the window, her face pale, eyes hollow as she stared into the distance. Mark fiddled with a broken audio recorder, his hands trembling from the experience. Sarah was quiet, her usual sharp gaze softened by exhaustion, dark circles heavy under her eyes. Finally, Sarah cleared her throat, breaking the silence. Last night was different. Her voice was low, almost a whisper. I've never felt anything like that. She paused, her brow furrowing as she glanced at Emily. That entity wasn't just a spirit. It's malevolent. Emily shuddered, closing her eyes as if to block out whatever haunted her. Malevolent is putting it lightly, she said, her voice shaking. I don't think we're dealing with a spirit that's bound by the same rules as others we've encountered. It feels darker, stronger. Her voice drops. It feels like something that wants to harm us, or worse. A chill ran down my spine. I'd known this wasn't just an ordinary haunting, but hearing them speak of it this way, toying with the idea that it might be something truly evil, sent my mind racing. Are you saying this could be a demon? I asked, barely able to say the word out loud. Sarah didn't answer right away. She simply nodded, her gaze heavy. Before she spoke, her voice low. There are signs, patterns of aggression, oppressive energy and manipulation. All the things we witnessed last night point in that direction. Emily looked at me, her expression grim. If it is a demon, that means it's not just bound to the house. It could be attached to a person. She hesitated, then added, and if it's latching onto you, Claire, it won't stop just because you leave. The weight of her words pressed down on me, making it hard to breathe. All this time, I thought that leaving the house might save me. Now, it seemed like this presence was woven into my life, as if it had taken root in my very soul. Mark cleared his throat, breaking the silence. We'll need to bring in someone specialized in this kind of entity. A demonologist, perhaps. He glanced at Sarah, who nodded in agreement. And there are protocols, rituals that could help weaken it. But it's dangerous, he added. If we take this route, we have to be prepared for things to get worse before they get better. Sarah looked at me directly, her gaze steady but full of concern. This isn't just about gathering evidence or documenting the haunting anymore, Claire. This is about survival. We'll need to confront this thing head on, but only if we're sure. Once we start, there's no turning back. The words hung in the air, heavy with implications I could barely comprehend. I swallowed, trying to process it all. I'd come this far, experienced more than I'd thought possible, but could I really face a demon? But then I thought of the dark eyes that watched me from the shadows, the whispering voice that haunted my every step. If I didn't face it, I knew I'd never find peace. Let's do it, I whispered, barely recognizing my own voice. Bring in the demonologist. I want my life back. Sarah nodded, determination hardening her features. Then we'll begin preparations. But remember, Claire, she says, her voice steady but laced with warning. This will be a fight, and it might be the hardest thing you've ever faced. The church was silent, bathed in the soft glow of candlelight, as Sarah walked down the narrow aisles towards the confessional. She had spent hours researching, calling contacts, and finally, after exhausting her usual resources, been directed to Father Matthews, a man who, by reputation alone, was known to face forces darker than most dared approach. Father Matthews, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and an aura of calm authority, stepped from a side door. His expression was kind, but serious, his gaze intense as he studied Sarah with a quiet patience. Miss Carter, he asked, his voice gentle, yet firm. Sarah nods, extending her hand, but she couldn't hide the tremor in her voice as she began. Father, I need your help. My friend, she's dealing with something far beyond the ordinary. We think it might be a demonic presence, and I don't know how much longer she can hold on. Father Matthews considers her words carefully, his expression darkening. If what you say is true, Miss Carter, this won't be a simple task. Demonic entities are relentless and frankly dangerous to everyone involved. Sarah swallowed, her voice thick with urgency. We've tried everything else. This spirit, whatever it is, torments her. It's been escalating and... She hesitated. It's as if it's claiming her life piece by piece. He nodded, his eyes somber. I'll come, but I warn you, this journey won't end quickly. It may test us all. The next evening, Father Matthews met us outside the house, his gaze traveling over the gorgeous Victorian facade, lingering on the shadowed windows as if sensing the house's secrets. A sense of dread stirred in me as I watched him, a man so experienced in the supernatural, yet still visibly disturbed by the house's aura. He turned to me, his face somber. Claire, is it? He asked, his voice both gentle and direct. Are you prepared for this? The process may not yield immediate relief. It could stir up much worse before we find any peace. I hesitated, but the memory of the night's horror pressed me forward. I understand. I'm ready to do whatever it takes to end this. Father Matthews took a deep breath, crossing himself before stepping over the threshold. Immediately his demeanor shifted. His shoulders tensed, and he whispered a quiet prayer under his breath as he entered, his gaze scanning the entryway with a wary intensity. It was as if he could feel it too, that dark, oppressive energy lurking in every corner, waiting. As we walked deeper into the house, Father Matthews moved quietly, observing, listening. In the dim light, his shadow stretched along the wall, blending into the darker corners where the atmosphere seemed thickest. A sudden chill settled over the room, and I saw him glance at a crucifix on the wall. It hung tilted, as if something had tried to rip it down. Father Matthews turned to me, his voice barely a whisper. It's here, isn't it? I nodded, unable to find words, and just as I did, the temperature dropped, and a faint, eerie whisper echoed through the hallway, swirling around us in a language I couldn't understand. I felt an oppressive weight pushing down on me, an almost physical presence that made it hard to breathe. Father Matthews narrows his eyes, holding up his hand, urging us to stay quiet. He took out a vial of holy water and a small, worn cross, his fingers tightening around it as he steps forward, the floorboards creaking underfoot. His voice dropped low, and he began to pray, his words calm but resolute. At his first utterance, the whispers grew louder, more insistent, swirling around us like a whirlwind. I could feel the malice radiating through the walls, every fiber of the house seeming to tremble with an unnatural rage. Reveal yourself, he said, his voice commanding. If you are here, I speak in the name of peace. Show yourself. Suddenly the lights flickered, casting strange shadows that danced and twisted. A cold wind swept through the room, the very air vibrating with a force I could barely stand. And then, just for a moment, the figure appeared at the end of the hallway, a dark, looming silhouette, its eyes hollow and fixed on us with a hatred so deep it was almost tangible. Father Matthews stepped forward, holding out the cross. You have no claim here. In the name of the holy, I cast you out. The figure remained motionless, but the darkness around it seemed to pulse, thickening, its form growing denser, more menacing. The cross in Father Matthew's hand trembled, as if resisting his grip, but he held firm, his voice unwavering as he continued the prayer. But the figure only laughed, a deep guttural sound that seemed to come from the walls themselves, and then, as suddenly as it appeared, it vanished, leaving behind only the suffocating oppressive silence that had filled the house before. Father Matthews turned to me, his face pale, but his gaze steady. Claire, he said quietly, this isn't just a haunting. You're dealing with a dark entity that doesn't intend to leave willingly. The weight of his words settled over me like a shroud. The truth was undeniable now, solidified in the cold, hollow echoes of that laugh. Whatever this presence was, it wasn't going to rest until it had claimed everything. Father Matthews set up a small altar in the parlor, carefully arranging candles, holy water, a Bible, and a thin silver chain that glinted in the candlelight. His movements were precise, methodical, as if any misstep could break the fragile balance between us and the thing lurking just beyond sight. He called us to gather around, his expression grave. Tonight we're going to confront whatever has taken hold here. It's important that each of you remain calm. Do not let it intimidate you. The fear it feeds on will only make it stronger." Emily swallows hard, glancing nervously toward the shadows pooling along the edges of the room. But she nodded, setting her jaw with determination. Mark crosses his arms, his usual confidence faltering, but steadying as Father Matthews continues. "This presence may retaliate, attempting to drive us out. Claire, you especially must stay strong. It has already marked you as its focus, which means it may try to break you." His gaze softened as he looked at me, and I could see a glint of sadness behind his stoic exterior. "You'll feel it more deeply than anyone else here." I nodded, wrapping my arms around myself for warmth. I felt drained already, the wear of countless sleepless nights tugging at my thoughts. But if this was the way to free myself, I would face whatever came next. As the candles were lit, Father Matthews began to pray, his voice low and firm, filling the silence with a calming rhythm. Shadows shifted in response, retreating and then creeping back again as if unwilling to release their grip. Suddenly, an oppressive heaviness settled in the air, and an unnatural cold swept through the room, extinguishing one of the candles with a hiss. Father Matthews raises his voice, his tone commanding, each word resonating with defiance. "I call upon the holy to banish all evil from this place. By the authority of light over darkness, I command you to reveal yourself." A sound echoed from deep within the house, a low rumble that built into a series of thudding footsteps. They grew louder, closer, until it seemed like they were just beyond the parlor door. We all froze, barely daring to breathe as the footsteps stopped, replaced by a scraping, scratching sound against the wood, a deliberate taunting gesture, as if it knew we were listening. The room suddenly felt smaller, suffocating, the walls pressing in. Then, with an abrupt force, every candle flame flickered, casting flickering shadows around the room. The cross on Father Matthew's altar rattled, then shot across the room, hitting the wall with a loud clang. "Hold steady," he said, his voice unwavering, even as the air grew heavy with a sense of dread that seemed to whisper doubts and insecurities into our minds. I felt a sudden stab of fear that seemed to come from nowhere, but it was rooted deeply, making me question everything. The strength of our efforts, the courage of our fight, was this truly worth it? Could we actually win against something so dark? Just then, a deep voice echoed through the room, chilling us to the bone. It wasn't human. The words, twisted and barely unrecognizable, slipped in and out of focus, like an ancient language trying to find its way into ours. Father Matthews held up the cross, his hand trembling slightly as he steps forward. "Reveal your name," he demanded, his voice steady but strained. "In the name of all that is holy, I command you to show yourself." The air thickened, charged with tension as the shadow in the doorway began to shift, a dark form that flickered in and out of sight like a mirage. Its face, if it could be called a face, was a dark, twisted void with eyes like deep, bottomless pits. They locked onto mine with a terrible intensity, filling me with an overwhelming sense of hatred so profound it was as if every dark feeling I'd have ever felt was suddenly amplified. Father Matthews began a Latin incantation, his voice steady, rising in defiance. The shadow wavered, shrieking in a voice that seemed to scrape against the walls. The lights flickered again, dimming as the entity twisted and shifted, almost as if writhing in pain. The candles guttered, fighting against a rising wind that seemed to come from within the house itself, rattling the windows, the walls, everything around us. Emily cried out as her chair slides across the room. Mark grips the edge of the table, his knuckles white. But Father Matthews continues, his voice raising above the chaos as the entity shrieks in response, its form flickering as if being pulled back by some unseen force. For a moment it looked weaker, more fragmented, the edges of its form fading. But then, with a sudden violent surge, the entity lashed out, sending every object in the room flying as the wind tore through, scattering candles, holy water, and books. Father Matthews staggers back, his breath ragged, and for a second, his gaze meets mine, filled with a mix of anger, determination, and something close to fear. "It's stronger than I thought," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "We'll need to prepare for something much more powerful. This is no ordinary exorcism." The room settled into silence once again, but the air still buzzed with an ominous energy, a lingering threat that warned us of the battle ahead. I could feel it now, in every fiber of my being. The entity wasn't just a presence. It was a force, relentless, ancient, and filled with an insatiable hunger. And it wasn't going to leave without a fight. Hey guys, I want to thank you for listening in. If you enjoyed today's story, be sure to let me know down below in the comments. Let me know what you think about the story and its characters, as I really, really enjoy writing about them. I try to capture the emotions and fear that they feel in the moment and make you take part in that feeling as well. Tell me what you would do in Claire's situation. I'm curious to know about that. Thanks a bunch, and I'll see you in the next one.